Princess Diana and Michael Jackson came from worlds that should never have collided. She was the most famous woman in the British royal family. He was the biggest pop star on the planet. She lived behind palace walls. Michael had created a world of his own. And yet, after meeting face to face just once, the two would remain connected for nearly 9 years. Years later, Michael would describe private conversations that stretched late into the night. And when Diana's life ended suddenly in 1997, the news reportedly hit him so hard that he collapsed in grief. So how did one brief meeting between a princess and a pop star become a relationship that continued quietly across continents? It began on July 16, 1988. At Wembley Stadium in London, Michael Jackson was in the middle of his record-breaking Bad World Tour when Princess Diana arrived with Prince Charles for what was supposed to be a formal royal appearance. Michael had already donated $150,000 to the Prince's Trust and another $100,000 to Great Ormond Street Hospital for Children. Everything about the evening had been carefully arranged. The royal arrival, the charity connection, the concert, the photographs. But before Michael ever stepped onto the Wembley stage, one small decision had already revealed just how much thought he had given to meeting Diana. And when the two finally came face to face backstage, Diana asked him a question he wasn't expecting at all.
I met her first at my concert in London. She was very kind, very loving.
Michael
very
Jackson
sweet.
was nervous. He admitted it himself years later. This wasn't just another night on the Bad Tour. Royalty was sitting in the audience, and before Princess Diana had even arrived backstage, Michael had already changed part of his show because of her. He removed Dirty Diana from the set list. The song had nothing to do with the princess. It was about a relentless rock groupie. But Michael worried that performing a song with her name in the title might seem disrespectful. So he took it out. Then Diana walked backstage. For someone who had spent years attending carefully staged public events and facing walls of cameras, she appeared surprisingly nervous herself. Michael later remembered her blushing as they met, and almost immediately, Diana asked him the one question he wasn't expecting. "Are you going to do Dirty Diana?" Michael explained that he had removed it because she was attending. Diana didn't seem offended. Quite the opposite. She wanted him to put it back. Michael did. And later that night, while Prince Charles remained seated, Diana could be seen enjoying the concert from the royal box. It was a small moment, but it revealed something the formal photographs could not. Michael had been worried about offending her. Diana, meanwhile, was far more comfortable with Michael's world than he had expected. Before they parted, Michael also gave Diana and Charles 2 miniature Bad Tour jackets for their sons, William and Harry. Then the evening ended. The photographs were published. The newspapers covered the royal visit. And as far as the public was concerned, that was the story. A superstar had met a princess. A princess had attended a concert. A few photographs had been taken backstage. Then everyone moved on. But that single meeting would eventually become much more significant than anyone watching from the outside could have known. Because according to Michael, Wembley was not the end of his contact with Diana. It was the beginning. And perhaps the strangest part of their story is that, despite the closeness Michael would later describe, the two apparently never needed another public meeting to maintain it. Their connection developed largely over the telephone. Across different countries, across different marriages, across some of the most turbulent years of both their lives. The Bad Tour ended. Michael married Lisa Marie Presley and later divorced her. Diana's marriage to Prince Charles deteriorated in front of the entire world. Yet Michael would later describe a private line of communication that continued behind all of those public events. That changes the way the Wembley photographs look. At the time, the media saw a celebrity encounter. Looking back, Michael described it as the beginning of a friendship that continued for years. And Diana wasn't simply someone who had turned up because royal protocol required her to be there. She genuinely enjoyed Michael's music. She had reportedly listened to albums such as Thriller and Bad, and on that night at Wembley, her enthusiasm was obvious. But music alone doesn't explain why two people living thousands of miles apart would continue speaking long after the concert was over. The more revealing explanation came from what they apparently talked about. Because underneath the obvious differences between them, Diana and Michael were dealing with experiences that were remarkably similar. Diana had married into one of the most scrutinized institutions in the world. Michael had become the center of an entertainment machine so enormous that almost every part of his life had become public property. Both knew what it meant to walk into a room and immediately become the story. Both knew what it was like to see private struggles turned into headlines. Both were photographed constantly, analyzed endlessly, and discussed by people who had never met them. And both were raising, or deeply concerned with, children while living under extraordinary public pressure. That was the part of their relationship the photographs at Wembley could never show. They didn't need each other because they were famous. Fame was precisely the problem. For almost everyone else, Princess Diana and Michael Jackson were public figures first, and human beings second. But when they spoke privately, neither had to explain what relentless attention felt like. They already knew. And years later, Michael would reveal just how private those conversations became. According to him, Diana didn't simply call occasionally to say hello. There were nights when the phone rang after 3 in the morning. And sometimes, they stayed on that phone for hours. What they talked about tells us far more about their relationship than any photograph ever could.
So I wrote a song called Dirty Diana. But I took it out of the show in honor of Her Royal Highness. And she took me away and she said, "Are you gonna do Dirty Diana?" I said, "No, I took it out of the show because of you." "No, I want you to do it. Do it. Do the song."
Years later, Michael finally explained what those late-night conversations were actually about. In a 1999 interview with German media, he described Diana as someone he had become extremely close to over the phone. At the time, Michael said he was still married to Lisa Marie Presley, when Diana would sometimes call him late at night, often after 3 in the morning. And these were not brief conversations. According to Michael, some of them lasted for hours. But the subjects they kept returning to were surprisingly simple: children and the press. Those two subjects may explain more about their connection than anything else. Diana was raising William and Harry while almost every decision she made as a mother was being watched, photographed, and judged. Michael, meanwhile, had spent years fighting against a press he believed had turned his private life into a permanent public spectacle. They came from completely different institutions, but the pressure surrounding them was strikingly similar. Diana knew what it meant to see a private problem become tomorrow's front page. Michael knew what it meant to wake up and discover that millions of people were discussing a version of him he barely recognized. For most people, those experiences would have been almost impossible to explain. For Diana and Michael, very little explanation may have been necessary. When Diana talked about the press, Michael already understood the feeling behind it. When the conversation turned to children, both knew how difficult it was to protect something personal while living a life the public believed it had the right to examine. That is where their worlds truly began to overlap. Not on the stage at Wembley, not in the photographs, but in conversations almost nobody else could hear. And yet there is one detail that makes the entire relationship even more unusual. Despite the years of phone calls Michael later described, Princess Diana and Michael Jackson appear to have met face-to-face only once. That night at Wembley in 1988. There was no long series of public dinners, no photographs of private holidays together. No repeated backstage reunions captured by photographers. The relationship Michael described existed largely through telephone calls, separated by countries, schedules, marriages, and some of the most intense media scrutiny either of them would ever experience. And in a strange way, that may have been exactly why it worked. Two people this famous could hardly be seen together without creating a story. A private phone call required no cameras, no royal protocol, no photographers waiting outside, no headlines the following morning. For a few hours, they could simply talk. But this also raises a question the more romantic versions of their story often ignore. If they were truly as close as Michael later suggested, why did they apparently meet only once? There is no simple answer. What we do have are Michael's own recollections of those calls, and later claims suggesting that, at least from his side, his feelings for Diana may eventually have become far more complicated than friendship.
It was at around this time that you began to experience difficulties in your marriage and your relationship to the Prince of Wales. Is that true?
Well, we were a newly married couple, so obviously we had those pressures too. And we had the media who were completely fascinated by everything we did. And it was difficult to share that load.
There was another detail in Michael's account that made those late-night calls feel especially significant. According to him, Diana was often the one reaching out. She was calling him. Think about what that meant by the mid-1990s. Diana was living inside Kensington Palace while her marriage was collapsing under relentless public scrutiny. Almost every movement she made could become a photograph, a headline, or a source of speculation. And somewhere in the middle of that pressure, Michael Jackson said she would pick up the phone, sometimes after 3 a.m, and talk to him for hours. Years later, he was still speaking about her with extraordinary warmth. In 2003, Michael described Diana as one of the sweetest people he had ever known, and said the reason they connected was simple: they could relate to one another. That much came directly from Michael. But this is also where the story becomes more complicated. Because after Michael's death, people who had worked around him began making stronger claims about what Diana actually meant to him. One of those claims came from his former bodyguard, Matt Fittids, who later said Michael had privately told him that he was in love with Diana, and even wanted to marry her. That is a far bigger claim than anything the photographs from Wembley could ever suggest. But it is important to separate the evidence. The years of phone conversations were described by Michael himself. His admiration for Diana was public. The claim that he wanted to marry her came later, through someone else recalling what Michael had allegedly told him in private. And Diana left behind no equally clear public statement showing that she viewed their relationship romantically. So there is a line here that the more sensational versions of this story often blur. There is strong evidence that Michael felt an unusual affection for Diana. There are later claims that those feelings became romantic. But a secret mutual romance is much harder to establish. Still, Michael never hid the fact that he found Diana remarkable. In his 1997 interview with Barbara Walters, his response to questions about Diana made his admiration obvious, and attraction alone may not have been what drew him to her. There was another connection between them that received far less attention. Long before they became friends, both had already made humanitarian work a major part of their public lives. Michael's donations connected him with the Prince's Trust before his first meeting with Diana. Diana, meanwhile, had become internationally known for causes that many public figures at the time approached cautiously. She famously challenged the stigma surrounding people with HIV and AIDS. She drew global attention to the human cost of landmines. And she repeatedly used her position to focus attention on sick children, people affected by war and communities that were easy for the rest of the world to overlook. Michael's charitable work came from a different world, but the instinct behind much of it was similar. Children, illness, poverty, human suffering. Using extraordinary fame to force attention onto people who normally received very little of it. So their connection was not simply that two famous people understood fame. They also appeared to share an idea of what fame could be used for. But by the middle of the 1990s, that fame was becoming increasingly difficult for both of them to carry. And this is where the timing of their friendship matters. Because while their private conversations were continuing, both Diana and Michael were entering some of the most turbulent years of their lives. For Diana, the breakdown of her marriage was no longer something the royal family could contain behind palace walls. By November 1995, she sat down for the now famous Panorama interview with Martin Bashir. And with one sentence, a private royal crisis became impossible to hide. There were 3 of us in this marriage. The following year, her divorce from Prince Charles was finalized. Diana lost the style of her Royal Highness, and the life she had spent years trying to navigate was fundamentally changed. She was still one of the most recognizable women alive, but she was no longer occupying the same place inside the institution that had made her globally famous. At almost exactly the same time, Michael's own public world was becoming increasingly unstable. And when you place those 2 timelines beside each other, the late-night phone calls begin to look very different. They were no longer simply conversations between a princess and a pop star. They were conversations between 2 people watching the structures around their lives begin to change and, in very different ways, begin to close in on them.
Woke up and my doctor gave me the news, and I fell back down in grief, and I started to cry. That's why the pain, I felt inner pain, pain in my stomach and in my chest.
Michael was going through his own collapse at almost exactly the same time. The 1993 allegations had changed the way the world looked at him. His marriage to Lisa Marie Presley began and ended under enormous public attention. He later married Debbie Rowe and became a father to his first 2 children. But even as his personal life changed, the scrutiny around him never disappeared. Years of tabloid coverage had transformed Michael from one of the most celebrated entertainers in the world into someone whose every appearance, relationship, and private decision could become a global headline. People around him would later describe a man who had become increasingly guarded and isolated. And that gives his friendship with Diana a different significance. She was one of the few people Michael said he did not have to explain that kind of pressure to. She already lived inside it. When they talked about intrusive headlines, Diana knew what that felt like. When they talked about children, both understood the instinct to protect a private family life from a public that seemed endlessly curious about it. For Michael, those conversations appear to have offered something increasingly rare: a connection with someone outside his immediate world who understood what it meant to have almost no ordinary privacy left. Then came the summer of 1997. By July, Diana had been divorced from Prince Charles for nearly a year. Her position within the royal family had changed, but her global influence had not. She was pursuing humanitarian causes on her own terms and beginning to shape a public life that was no longer defined entirely by her marriage. That summer, photographs of Diana with Dodi Fayed filled newspapers around the world. Whatever direction her private life was taking, one thing was clear: she appeared to be entering a new chapter. No one knew how short that chapter would be. On August 31st, 1997, Diana was fatally injured in a car crash in the Pont de l'Alma tunnel in Paris. She was 36 years old. For millions of people, the news was almost impossible to process. For Michael Jackson, it was personal. In an interview with Barbara Walters shortly afterward, Michael described the moment he learned Diana had died. He said the shock overwhelmed him. He fell down. He cried. And suddenly, all of those private conversations Michael had described, the late-night calls, the discussions about children, the frustration with the press, had ended without warning. This was not simply another celebrity death to him. This was someone whose voice he knew. Someone he said had called him in the middle of the night. Someone he had described as a person who could understand a part of his life very few others could. Michael was so affected that he postponed a scheduled performance on his History World Tour. When he eventually returned to the stage, Diana was still on his mind. He dedicated the concert to her, and in front of thousands of people, Michael turned what had largely been a private friendship into a public farewell. "I love you, Diana," he told her in spirit. "Shine, and shine on forever." Then he called her what millions around the world had already come to believe she was, the people's princess. For years, almost everything meaningful about their friendship had happened away from the cameras. Now, only after Diana was gone, the depth of Michael's grief was visible to everyone. But grief was not the only thing her death left behind. According to people who later worked closely around Michael, Diana's death also intensified something else inside him: fear. And what he reportedly became afraid of reveals just how deeply her death affected the way he saw his own life.
He was very kind, very loving, very sweet.
What did you two talk about?
I wrote a song called Dirty Diana, and it's not about Lady Diana, it's about certain kind of girls that hang around concerts or clubs. You know, they call them groupies.
The groupies, mm-hmm.
I've lived in that all my life. You see these girls, they do everything with the band and, everything you can imagine.
Michael's public mourning did not end with the concert tribute. In Los Angeles, he attended a memorial service held in Diana's honor and told reporters that he had come because a friend he cared about was gone. He did not attend her funeral at Westminster Abbey in London. But in the days surrounding Diana's death, Michael repeatedly made clear that, to him, this was not the loss of a distant public figure. It was the loss of someone he considered a friend. And according to people who later worked around him, his reaction continued long after the first shock had passed. Former bodyguard Matt Fitties later described Michael's grief as unusually intense and deeply private. But Fitties also made another claim. He said Diana's death heightened Michael's fears about his own safety. According to that later account, Michael became increasingly concerned that powerful forces could also target him, and he reportedly responded by tightening his personal security. There is an important distinction here. Those fears tell us something about Michael's state of mind after Diana died. They do not, by themselves, establish anything about what caused Diana's crash. But emotionally, the connection is revealing. For Michael, Diana's death appears to have represented more than grief. It was also a reminder of how exposed a person could remain even when surrounded by wealth, fame, and security. And that brings us back to the question underneath this entire story. What were Michael Jackson and Princess Diana actually to each other? The easiest answer would be to call them two celebrities who became friends. But that description misses what made the relationship unusual. They had met only once. They lived thousands of miles apart. Their lives were controlled by completely different institutions. And yet Michael later described conversations that continued privately for years. They did not seem to bond over the glamorous parts of being famous. They bonded over the parts that fame had taken away. Privacy, normality, the ability to protect the people they loved, the freedom to make mistakes without seeing those mistakes become headlines. Diana could talk to Michael about the press without first explaining what relentless attention felt like. Michael could talk about children and privacy with someone who understood what it meant to raise a family while photographers waited outside. That may be why something as ordinary as a telephone conversation became so important. For most people, talking privately for hours is nothing remarkable. For Princess Diana and Michael Jackson, privacy itself had become a luxury. Even the small moments from their only meeting make more sense in that context. Before Diana arrived, Michael worried enough about her feelings to remove Dirty Diana from his show. When she learned what he had done, she told him to put it back. He had expected formality. She responded with humor. Later, she enjoyed the concert while the cameras watched from a distance. None of those moments proves a romance, but they do show two people paying attention to one another almost immediately. And perhaps that is the most important distinction in this story. The world was constantly paying attention to Michael Jackson and Princess Diana. But paying attention to someone is not the same as understanding them. Millions of people watched Diana. Millions watched Michael. Very few people could understand what it felt like to be watched that way. They could. And that may explain why a single backstage meeting at Wembley became something neither of them appears to have simply forgotten. Still, one question remains. Michael's affection for Diana is relatively easy to see in his own words and in the way he mourned her. But did that make their relationship a secret romance? Or has the story become more romantic in the years since Diana died than the evidence actually allows? The answer lies in separating what Michael himself said from what others later said for him. So what was this relationship really? Was Michael Jackson secretly in love with Princess Diana? The later account from his former bodyguard certainly suggests that Michael's feelings may have gone beyond friendship. But that claim should not be confused with what can actually be established from the public record. What we can say with much greater confidence is this. Michael and Diana met face-to-face at Wembley in 1988. Michael later described years of private telephone conversations between them. He spoke openly about how closely they could relate to one another. He remembered conversations about children and the press. And when Diana died, his reaction was immediate and deeply emotional. He said he collapsed when he heard the news. He postponed a concert. He publicly mourned her. And when he finally returned to the stage, he dedicated his performance to the woman he called the People's Princess. Those things tell us that Diana mattered to him. What they do not prove is that the two were secretly involved in a mutual romantic relationship. That distinction matters. Michael's admiration is documented in his own words. The claim that he wanted to marry Diana came later through someone else. And there is no equally clear statement from Diana showing that she saw Michael in the same romantic way. So perhaps the truth is both simpler and more interesting than the legend. They may never have been secret lovers, but they appear to have shared something that was extraordinarily difficult for either of them to find. Someone who understood what it felt like to stop belonging entirely to yourself. Diana knew what it was like to see private pain transformed into public entertainment. Michael knew what it was like to have strangers build an image of you from photographs, rumors, and headlines. Both knew the strange loneliness of being recognized almost everywhere, while being genuinely known by very few people. And somehow, after one meeting backstage at Wembley, they found enough common ground to keep talking. Not in front of cameras, not at celebrity parties, not through carefully staged appearances. Privately, sometimes late at night. Across thousands of miles, while Diana's marriage was breaking apart. While Michael's public image was changing dramatically. While the rest of the world was watching both of them for completely different reasons. That may be the most striking part of their story. The world noticed Diana dancing at Michael's concert. It noticed Michael standing beside a princess for photographs. It noticed the marriages, the divorces, the scandals, the interviews, the endless headlines. What almost nobody could see were the conversations happening when the cameras were gone. Princess Diana died on August 31st, 1997. She was 36 years old. Michael Jackson died on June 25th, 2009. He was 50. More than 2 decades later, the question surrounding their relationship still tends to be the same. Was it friendship? Was Michael in love with her? Could there have been something more? We may never have enough evidence to answer every part of that question. But perhaps the part we can answer is more revealing. Michael Jackson did not remember Princess Diana as simply another famous person he once met. He remembered someone he believed understood him, someone he continued speaking to after Wembley, someone whose death affected him profoundly. And maybe that is why the simplest detail in this entire story remains the most powerful. 2 of the most watched people on Earth appear to have found a friendship that survived largely because almost nobody was watching it. The world has spent years asking whether Michael Jackson loved Princess Diana. But perhaps the better question is this. For those hours on the telephone, were they finally able to stop being Michael Jackson and Princess Diana and simply be two people talking to someone who understood? So how do you see it? A close friendship? One-sided love? Or something that never fit neatly into either category? Tell us in the comments. And there is another relationship in Michael Jackson's life that makes his comments about Diana even more intriguing, especially after what someone from inside his security team later claimed about the woman Michael truly wanted to marry. That full story is on the channel.